Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining members of the Republican Conference, especially our members from the Housing, Construction, and Community Development Committee. We've been with you a couple of times over the last month. We recently shared with you our Republican housing package, a package that really is comprehensive and really does a lot of great things for all New Yorkers. We were with you last week to talk about some of the things we are hearing in the budget, and now we are here with you today because based on what the governor said yesterday, it appears that there's a consensus on a housing deal. And just judging by some of the comments I've heard from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, calls that I've gotten from people who work in the housing industry, and just what I've read in the newspapers, it seems to be a deal that nobody likes, a deal that nobody is happy with. There does seem to be some focus on incentivizing development in New York City, which is something we really need because when the Democrats refused to extend the 421A program, we saw this dramatic decline in the number of new homes that were being built. But I have to ask, I represent a portion of upstate New York that is pretty rural. And I have to ask, after listening to the governor talk about the agreement she's come to with the leaders of the legislature, what about upstate New York? What's in it for upstate? How are we going to get more homes built? How are we going to create a more competitive housing market that will help us drive down the cost of homes? In this proposal, where's the support for first-time home buyers? Where's the support for our workforce? You know, we hear a lot about Micron coming online and the thousands and thousands of jobs that are going to be created. Where the heck are they going to live? Where are they going to live? And what about our seniors? Where's the support in this budget proposal for builders and municipalities to build homes that are more affordable? I recently had a conversation with one builder from Monroe County, which includes the city of Rochester, and he was explaining to me that when they go to build a single-family home, just the cost of running the infrastructure, getting the infrastructure in, is $65,000. Another builder in Ontario County, he's building in Victor, New York, was telling me how their cost to get infrastructure in cost $95,000 for a single-family home. So think about those costs and think about ultimately how it drives up the selling price. It gets homes up in the high 300s, 400s. We need to do better than that, and we can do better than that by offering incentives for infrastructure. Our Senate Republican Conference has introduced a comprehensive package of bills to bring more housing online and increase access to more affordable housing options in upstate and also in New York City. It's also very important to us that any plan that is proposed preserves local control. When I listened to the governor speak yesterday, it sounded like at one point she was talking about the New York Housing Opportunity Corporation, but I think she reframed it and was calling it something different, the New York Housing Opportunity for the Future or something like that. But what that does is just the opposite of what people want. It exempts new projects from local zoning. It takes away local decision making, and to me, forming more corporations just creates another level of government bureaucracy, which is going to slow down building homes. So I'm here today to encourage my legislative colleagues, whether they live in upstate or regardless of where they live in this state, to really take a hard look at this package and consider supporting it. How can you possibly support it? As I said before, it's getting tougher and tougher to do business in New York State. We have some of the highest property taxes in the nation. We have regulatory requirements that are consistently changing and making it difficult for businesses to decide to invest in our state. We have so many pro-criminal policies. These are the real issues that we have to address if we want to incentivize new building, if we want to help people achieve that American dream of home ownership and build that generational wealth. But here to talk more about the housing plan is Senator George Borrello.
Thank you very much, Pam. You know, if you want to make housing more affordable in New York, we need to make New York more affordable, period. And that's the missing element here. We're pushing things like the New York Heat Act, which is going to make housing much more expensive. At the same time, we're eroding property owner rights. We talk about good cause eviction. This is a socialist policy. Let's make no mistake about it. It's being pushed by a socialist, a member of the DSA, Sia Weaver. She's the architect, she is the chief proponent, and she is the one leading this charge. And what is that going to look like? It's going to take away the incentive for people to want to own property and lease it to other people, which is how most people in New York live. They live in property that they rent. We're going to reduce that supply by chasing away responsible property owners, by taking away the basic right to have the dominion over their property that they own. That's what Sia Weaver is pushing. That's what the DSA wants. Because they want us to be a third world nation here in New York State. They want us to live like people in third world banana republics, where the wealthy, politically connected people have their own homes, and everyone else lives in some kind of government-controlled housing project. That's what the DSA wants, and that's what things like good cause eviction is going to do for property and home ownership here in New York State. It has to end. We have to have common sense solutions. What they're looking to do is to take all the bad things in New York City and spread it like a cancer across New York State. They're going to do things like good cause eviction. They're going to take things like rent control, and they're going to spread it throughout New York State. Look how well that's worked in New York City. We have a housing crisis when you've had rent control for decades in New York City. But that's such a good idea. We're going to spread that cancer across this state. Meanwhile, in places like I represent, in the city of Jamestown, a city of 27,000 people, 76% of the houses are 75 years or older. Asbestos problems, problems with foundations. We have huge problems with out-of-state, out-of-country landlords, people that, because locals no longer want to be in the business of owning property, we now have people in places like Australia and Germany that own homes in New York State. No accountability. Because here, we are driving away responsible homeowners. We are driving away the incentive for people to want to actually own and maintain a home and maybe rent it to somebody else. That's a no-no for the Democrats. They don't want anybody owning a property unless you live in it. Nobody else should be able to rent property to somebody else. They might say that that's not true, but this is what things like good cause eviction will do. That will be the end result. And that's the result the DSA wants. They want a socialist housing program here in New York State. We cannot tolerate that. And what we're going to see in this budget from this governor is not standing up. Not standing up for New Yorkers, not standing up for people that own property, not standing up for the taxpayers, and certainly not standing with upstate New York folks where she's from. What about squatters? Okay, the Democrats say that's just a myth. There's no such thing. It's a real thing. It's happening across the state. Where are the squatter protections in this budget? We're not going to have them. And in New York City, after 30 days, squatters have tenants' rights. Another bad idea that I'm sure they want to spread across New York State. This madness has to end. New York State needs to become responsible, needs to support homeownership, and certainly needs to support the people of New York State. Enough of this socialism. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jack Martins. I'm the senator from the 7th Senate District, and although downstate, I join my upstate colleagues in their opposition, wholesale opposition to the governor's proposal as announced yesterday. For anyone who had hoped that there would be a solution to the affordable housing crisis, this isn't it. The governor identified housing as the #1 priority 2 years ago, again last year, and then reiterated it this year, and there's nothing in this proposal that will provide a single unit of affordable housing in the short term. Everything here is long term. By the time all these incentives kick in, developers build, whether it's in New York City or elsewhere, it'll be 5, 10 years down the line. It's like your house is on fire. It's an emergency. People are leaving New York State. They identify housing as the #1 issue for why people are leaving New York State. Your house is on fire. And you say, you know what, I won't get there for 2 or 3 days. It's a crisis, and it requires an immediate response. And the governor and the majorities in this House have the ability to provide that response now. There are 300,000 units of affordable housing right now in New York City. that are occupied by people making over $100,000 a year. 300,000 units of rent-stabilized housing in New York City. It's not means-tested. They had the ability to means-test it. And yet, when it came to the new 485X program that they're providing, they set affordability at 80% of area median income. For those of you who may want to ask, area median income in New York City is $100,000, $98,000 a year. So anyone making less than $80,000, when that 485X program comes online and actually gets built 10 years from now, will have access, those limited few will have access to affordable units. What about everyone now? What about everyone who isn't earning area median income in New York City? The fact that affordability is hitting those making less, yet the majorities in this House and the governor have chosen not to take action is absurd. It's an insult to every housing advocate in New York State, everyone who's been advocating for some solution that they didn't do anything. They kicked the can down the road because, make no mistake, there will not be a solution to this housing crisis as a result of what they're proposing today. Now, to hear the governor speak about it, and I'm sure when the majorities come out and speak about it, they're going to tell you that this is a success. Think about it. How many units are going to be built this year? What do we tell our kids when they come out of school and they want to find an apartment, and yet we tell them that we'd rather prioritize people making hundreds of thousands of dollars, paying $1,000 a month of rent in New York City, as opposed to giving it to somebody who's making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year? We had a proposal on the table, as Senator Helming said, as part of our housing plan that would have means-tested affordable housing and rent-stabilized housing in New York City, requiring those, as their leases come up, to have to show how much income they have. And if they can no longer justify being in an affordable unit, in a rent-stabilized unit, make it available for somebody who does qualify. We do that in every other safety net program we have, whether it's EBT, housing vouchers, whatever it happens to be. It's means-tested to make sure that we're not subsidizing millionaires at the expense of making those opportunities available for all. And yet, their standard, 80% of AMI for new housing that's going to be built, and yet we know right now, folks, from this, it's the New York City's own 2023 housing survey. If you look at the survey and their own statistics, 30% of affordable units, rent-stabilized units in New York City right now are occupied by people making more than $100,000 a year. It's absurd. It's an insult, and they should have to answer for it. And I'd encourage you to ask them, why haven't you done that? What are we telling people today? This housing program and this proposal is a sham, and they should be embarrassed. They got it wrong. It took them 2 weeks beyond April 1st to come up with a sham, and no one here should fall for it. As for the construction of homes on state land, you know, I'm a former mayor. I come from a village on Long Island where we prioritized building multifamily housing over the years. I had the good fortune of being there and putting into place a zoning overlay that has resulted in about 2,000 units having been approved over the course of the last 15 years. So I support multifamily housing. I support local control. I support doing it the right way. And I have volunteered, not only to the majority here in this House, but to the governor as well, to help. Because obviously they don't know what they're doing. The idea of undermining local control and local zoning by local communities by bypassing SECRA and the ability to do environmental exams and reviews of the impacts of multifamily housing on our communities is something that is, frankly, it's been a bedrock of our local communities, whether upstate or downstate. We do it intelligently, and this is how we've done it for generations. And the fact that they would ignore that for the sake of building housing, when we know we can build housing the right way if we incentivize it properly, is again another measure where they have failed. And so when they come out and they declare victory, understand, it is neither a victory for affordable housing advocates, it's neither a victory for our children and for those who are struggling to make ends meet in this state. It's not a victory for this state. If anything, it's a step backwards because they could have done it, they didn't do it, they missed the opportunity, and we should hold them accountable for that. And with that, I want to take the opportunity to thank Senator Helming for being our leader on housing issues here in New York State, Senator Borrello for being a colleague on the Housing Committee. Folks, we're not done yet. This budget hasn't been approved. Let's hold their feet to the fire and make sure that we actually get affordable housing for every New Yorker in all four corners of this state. Thank you.
I just wanted to touch on, I think it was Senator Borrello who commented on squatters. Something new calls that are coming into my office, and I'm sure other elected officials' offices. I'm hearing from seniors who are afraid to leave their homes now because they're afraid if they leave their home for an extended period of time, someone is going to move in and take over, and they're not going to be able to get back into their own home. Their home that they worked so hard to be able to purchase, their home that they've been paying taxes on for decades. One interesting call I got was from a young woman. Her mother was staying with her. She had just had hip surgery, and her mother just would not stop. She wanted to get back home. She lives on one of our Finger Lakes in a very secluded area, and was so concerned that that was a place that a squatter would identify and move into, and she was so afraid. Listen, this is the United States of America. Our seniors should not be afraid that they go and have a medical procedure that requires them to be out of the home, or they go on a vacation, whatever it is. They should not be afraid that here in the New York State, that squatters are going to have more rights than them, that they're going to be able to take over their homes. It's wrong. And the fact that this housing proposal doesn't address that among all the other issues you've heard is terrible, especially when we have someone like Senator Mario Mattero, who has introduced at least 4 bills that would help us address the squatter issue promptly and the way it should be.
With that, are there any questions from press?
How do you see the budget moving forward at this point, given the announcement of the conceptual agreement, parameters of the conceptual agreement last night?
What I find interesting about that, we were on the floor when we all got notice that the governor was going to be coming out with an announcement on this conceptual agreement, and Senator Krueger, the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, knew nothing about it. And off the floor, asking some of my colleagues, are you in agreement? Are you close? They just shrugged. So I'm not feeling confident that there really and truly is a conceptual agreement among the 3 leaders.
When there was a conceptual agreement last year, were you aware of where their talks didn't have you off guard last year? I know this year it's something that caught everyone off guard.
Yeah, I think it caught everyone off guard this year. Last year the Buffalo Bills plan? I think that caught us all off guard. But other than that, I don't remember a presentation like the governor gave yesterday evening. Yes.
So, yeah, the budget does include, apparently, right?
Apparently,
Right.
allegedly.
Allegedly, but it's supposed to clarify some legal language for squatters a little bit, or at least to delineation between, it's not tenants, and also there is a new statewide tax incentive the governor talked about yesterday that's supposed to reduce construction. Does that address the building, the supply, why doesn't it leave us instead?
So on the first part of your question on squatters, I would say we need to see the details, right, before we can really comment on it. But based on what I've read in the media, it talks about whatever language is in there, that it would still require the homeowner, the property owner, to go to court. That's ridiculous.
Yes.
So again, that older person I was talking about who is recovering from hip surgery would have to go through the court system if somebody moved into her home. That's crazy. Again, some days I wonder, is New York State part of the United States of America? Like, what happened to our freedoms? And yeah. And so on the other, the tax incentives.
Yeah, there is a new tax incentive that's supposed to help build more multifamily homes out of state, another area,
Yeah.
Out of state communities. So is that kind of you wanted to see to spur construction? What did you want to see instead?
what I know of the incentive from the little bit of information we got yesterday from the governor's presentation, absolutely not. So that tax incentive, it's my understanding, is part of that housing opportunities for the future, where it allows for building on state-owned lands, and it trumps all local zoning requirements. It takes away local decision-making. So that's the exact opposite of what our plan proposes. Our plan incentivizes, and it doesn't take away from local governments or school districts' ability to collect property taxes. What it does, it incentivizes by allowing credits on state income tax, et cetera.
As far as the good causes, I want to think about, pieces go, we've been hearing if there is supposed to be for an opt-in program for communities outside of the city, so does that?
We'll see.
So many questions, right? Who can opt in? A county, a village, a town, a city? Like, who can opt in? There's no information around that. And to me personally, I'm not speaking for the group, but it's still rent control. It expands rent control across the entire state, something that I do not support.
Do you think the conceptual really gets us to closer to a final budget plan that I know everybody's been trying to get on time here? Do you see us like pushing this to after the 2-week break, or is this going to get much more?
Great question. I wish I had a decent answer to give you. I have no idea. And again, talking to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I don't think they have any idea either. Some have told me that we'll get a budget done this week. Others have said we'll pass another extender and we'll be called back next week after Passover. So I don't think anyone really knows.
If I may, just going back to your question about the incentives, infrastructure is extraordinarily important. Infrastructure is very important when it comes to building affordable housing, building multifamily housing, sewers, water, roads, bridges, access. All of that cannot possibly be covered by $500 million that they reportedly say they have available to incentivize multifamily housing. And so for the number of units that they're projecting to build, aside, and certainly I agree with Senator Helming with the need to incentivize, but that money has to be made available. If you're going to want to build it, you got to make a commitment that you're going to make up all of that infrastructure cost, and $500 million is nowhere near what the impact would be to our local communities.
Can I just say something in my area? I'm Senator Mario Matera's 2nd Senate District, which is Smithtown and Huntington. Just so everybody understands, in Suffolk County, we're only 25% sewered. 25%. And that infrastructure, me being in the trades, I know what I've done over the years to make sure that we got sewage treatment plants, so then we could properly build. The problem is the infrastructure is not put in place, so we care about this housing. Yes, we really do. We care about housing, but we got to do it the right way. This is the cart before the horse. And this is the budget, I feel, is not happening is because the governor is trying to do something and she's getting, pulled back from things. That's how I feel. And getting back to the squatter situation, it's an epidemic. We all know what's going on with that. My bill, S8867, is the same bill that this got passed in Florida. It was unanimous. It was both sides. Governor Ron DeSantis signed it, and it's going to be effective July 2024, that police could finally do their job. They have the tools to do their job. They could go in with an affidavit from the owner saying that, guess what, someone is in their home illegally. They could go in there and those squatters could be removed. And remember, we all care about life, liberty, and property is so important to all of us. And that is the largest investment that we have is our properties in all cases. Everybody loves their homes, and not for anything, homes could be taken away because squatters right now have more rights than property owners. Thank you.
Specific on the budget deal aside, on the conceptual budget deal aside, how do you
The handshake conceptual budget.
do you agree with the governor's framing of, do you agree that crime and affordability is the right message to send to voters on the budget?
I'm glad that the governor has taken a page out of the Republican Senate Conference's playbook. We have been talking about crime and affordability for years now, and it's great to see that people realize that that is exactly what we need to address. If we're going to get businesses to invest in New York State, if we're going to get people to remain here, to live in this state, we have to address the crime. We have to address affordability. how we get there, I think we may be on separate paths.
Say something on that also. You know, you look at the fact that our Democrat colleagues are so beholden to the most radical elements of the left that they can't agree that we should protect retail workers. That's not good. That's a non-starter for one of the three Dems in the room. He doesn't want to see that, the speaker. What does that say? Well, you know what? Where I am, it's not as much of a problem. But in communities of color in New York City, where you have closing basics, grocery stores, bodegas, pharmacies, that's a big problem. You can't protect a retail worker who's essentially an essential worker in an area where they may not have a pharmacy if that pharmacy closes. Even in a city as big as New York, you're seeing that. You're creating deserts because retail operations can no longer afford to operate in a city as big as New York. So they can talk all they want about crime or affordability. They'll nibble around the edges, but they'll never take a bite out of crime because they're not willing to do the most important thing that they have to do, and that is to put criminals in prison, period.
Any other questions? Jamie?
Anything in the conceptual budget that you do like besides?
Well, it's written on an Etch-a-Sketch, so let's wait and see what it actually looks like. So, yeah.
Chantal?
May I just say, in a budget that is, what is the final number?
237.
237, of course, there are going to be things that are good. There should be, there better be. But until we have the details, it's very hard to answer.
Well, you said to New Yorkers that are ready to vote for the I mean, we've got an out-migration happening. People look at what this number is. Is there anything for taxpayers that are ready to pull the trigger and just get out of here?
Good question.
I'll be able to answer that question once I see the budget, but just preliminary, I don't see any relief for the middle class, which is very disappointing. It seems like we continue down this path of spend, 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 when we really need to rein it in and provide some relief to the people of New York.
May I say something?
Sure.
So I like to answer the sort of question that especially my constituents are very, very concerned about, is that taxpayers' monies are going to the migrant situation, and that's a huge, huge problem because taxpayers sit there and they said, why is my money going to something that the governor and the mayor of New York could have fixed? Sanctuary state, sanctuary city. They could have went and they could have rescinded it, right? But they didn't. And right now we have no idea. We have two hotels that are right here, $400 a night that taxpayers are paying. $1,000 a month they're giving credit cards. Our taxpayers are sitting there going, what happened to our New York State residents? Just like when I talked to the Department of Labor, I said, what do you think the unemployment rate is? She goes, well, I said 4.5%. I go, what does that equate to? 215,000 New Yorkers that are out of work. Why aren't we helping our New Yorkers? Why aren't we helping our taxpayers? And really giving $1,000 a month credit cards and putting people up that we don't even know that aren't vetted? It's not their fault. It's the governor of New York and the mayor of New York that created this disaster. And I told that to the governor at Kings Park High School. Told him when she was going to cut foundation aid, $1 million out of school. $1 million, making a press conference about a DRI. Very, very important. But what about the $2.4 billion that's going to be in this budget? There's a disaster that they created to take care of migrants with our taxpayers' monies. That's a huge, huge problem. Bail reform, we all know it, needs to be repealed. Can't, 4 times they try to work, they can't do it. It needs to be repealed. Get the district attorneys, get the judges, and get the PBAs to the table and come up with the right bail reform. It needs to be repealed.